just want to share this random thought. Not really random. I think a lot during the day, and I think sometimes God really speaks in my thoughts. He speaks to me and reveals things, and honestly reveals a more graphic way of seeing his scripture and his truths and his principles. And so that literally just happened. I know this is going to sound really elementary to some people, and it's going to even sound really simple, but I think the illustration is very helpful. When I think of how we as Christians are to deny ourselves and follow him. So if anyone wants to be a disciple, right, he says, you must deny yourself, pick up your cross, and follow me. If anyone wants to be a disciple, you have to do that thing, that denying of yourself. And so we could spend weeks, I'm sure, a whole year just talking about what that means, what that looks like. But just a quick illustration kind of just hit me, and I felt like, why not share, or why not at least just document it so it's solid and it's there. I can look back at it and it's a illustrated note. But the fact of how I think sometimes that can look like how a marriage looks like, and there's even scripture of how when a man and woman come to marriage, the man must leave, and this is a whole other teaching and a lesson in itself of how a man leaves his family and becomes one with his wife. There's this huge a bigger responsibility on the man. Obviously, I think there's a dual partnership, how obviously the woman leaves the home too, but the responsibility and the call is actually for the man to leave his father and mother and become one with his wife. And so there's that element there. I think of all these different elements and how they all just coincide. There's a beautiful thread throughout scripture, but there's that element, and how we are the church, we are the bride of Christ. And oftentimes marriage is talked about as how Christ loved the church and we are his bride. Like, there's these illustrations that are used so that we as humans can see closer, get a clearer picture of what it all means, what's the big picture. So when I was thinking about how we are to deny ourselves and how we are as if married to Christ, not in a weird way, but as a intimate relationship way, a covenant way, a commitment, a devotion to. We are to deny ourself, which that's a whole conversation, what all that means, what that looks like, and all the things that we're denying. But when you think of that element as denying yourself, following him, you're picking up and following. When you think of this element of how many couples come together, and I'm not trying to attack anybody, because I think it really stems back to your heart and your motives and your why. So I'm going to say this thing and it's going to trigger some people, and it is what it is, but I'm not saying it in a way to attack. I just think the illustration is very helpful. But how many couples come together and they get married, and yet they still hold on to their singleness. And I this hit me because I did the same thing. I didn't even think I was. I definitely didn't try to, because I understood what marriage is, at least at a basic level. So I definitely didn't try to do this. I didn't mean to. I didn't want to. I wasn't even aware of it for a while. But through the years, you start seeing the things that you're holding on to. But there's so many marriages that the extreme would be they become like roommates. They're married on paper, but they become like roommates. Two separate lives, staying who you are, and you're just married. So there's that extreme. But then there's those that just, they become married and commit themselves to each other, and yet they have, they still have separate things, like separate bank accounts. They have maybe separate beds, separate, they don't touch too much. They don't, maybe the separate blankets. There's these things, and I'm not trying to attack anybody, but there's these elements to a marriage that sometimes, if you're not careful, you can see it as, you have to at least ask yourself, am I holding on to my singleness? Am I still holding on to me? Because I'm called to let go of me. And in a marriage, we're separating ourselves. Like, as a man, and I'll hound more on this because I am a man. I'll talk to men on top of more so as I would talk to women. But there's responsibilities for both. But if I were just talking to a man, there's a heaviness, a duty, there's a responsibility, there's an accountability for us to, there's a call for us to lay down our lives, to lay down our lives for our spouse, as Christ laid down his life for the church. So there's that piece. You're laying down who you are, not losing your identity, not anything absurd or crazy or out of order. No, it's you're laying down your singleness, your the things that maybe are unhealthy, things that are maybe getting in the way of your intimacy, things that are getting in the way of just being a good steward of your relationship. All of that, you have to lay that down. You're like, maybe I used to do this with most of my time before I got married, and now, you know what, I have to not do that so much. Like, it's the simple things a lot of times, but we're still called to lay down our lives for our spouse, our wife. And then when you eventually, if you have kids, obviously they're secondary to your wife, but they're still your responsibility. And so there's this big element that as we enter into a covenant of a relationship with our wife, there's a call now. You're to lay down your life for that woman. That's a huge responsibility, but it's necessary. And so when I think of how we are to deny ourselves and pick up our cross and follow Jesus, it's a lot like that. Because a lot of times we on paper, a spiritual paper or contract, we're in covenant with Jesus. We are Christians now. We are connected to him. We're saying that we are believers, we're followers of Christ, and yet our life really is just showing it on paper, but we're still single. We're still holding on to ourself. And so I thought of that as just such a perfect illustration of how so many different directions, so many elements of how Christ laid down his life for the church, how men are supposed to leave our parents to enter into relationship and marriage covenant with our wife. And so we're leaving something behind and entering into being one with. And so just like that, we are to be one with Christ. We're to be intimate, personal relationship with Christ. That's why he says, because not everybody will. Not everyone will take this to heart and be so serious that they will pick up their cross and follow him. But that's the requirement, is if you want to be a disciple of me, that means follow me, live like me, devote yourself to me, you must deny yourself. And that's crucial. But so many Christians, and I can say this because I was this way for so long, of just being comfortable and not really fully denying myself and surrendering my every bit of me. I can see that because I was that way at the beginning of my marriage too. But that's the requirement, is you have to deny yourself. The things that you that run your life on, the desires that run your life, the things that you get upset about if this doesn't happen or you don't get this, like, deny yourself, get rid of it. It's one of the hardest things. That's why it's one of the most important things. And so I hope that this illustration just sheds some light on, makes things a little more clear. I know it's not the the light bulb above your head moment, but I think every little bit that we can to get closer to understanding what this all requires, what following Christ looks like. Why not hear it, understand it, apply it? Because we are to deny ourselves, not hold on to our singleness, not hold on to our flesh. And so, yeah, just some thoughts. Bless you.